Today we're going over some shocking facts that I found about American consumerism, about the amount of possessions that we own to the amount of space that we're living in and stuff that we are wasting. So I hope you guys find this helpful. I know as I was going through them, it made me self-aware of what I am doing and that I don't want to be with everybody else being overly consumeristic. So hopefully you guys can get some value out of this as well. And if you guys do get some value out of this and you want to see some future content, feel free to like and subscribe, hit the little bell thingy. I post videos on minimalism and finances every single Monday. Let's begin. There are over 300,000 things in the average American's home. This is probably the most popular one, and it's also one of the most shocking. Like, there's no way that you need 300,000 things. You also don't need to go the other way and have, 117 things, but there is that middle ground of, if you sold off half of that stuff and you got $1 per item for 100,000 items, think of how much less stress and how much more money you would have if you, cut that number down in half. Americans spend about $1.2 trillion on non-essential goods every year. The average American throws out about 4.4 pounds of trash every single day. Now, the population of America is around 328 million, so let's do the math here. What does that equal?
1.4 billion pounds per day.
Thank you.
Anytime.
Hey, what does that equal a year?
511 billion pounds per year.
That's an insane amount of stuff that we are just consuming, and it really just shows the consumer mindset of America, where everything is, it can be trash, it can be buying more clothes and throwing out old clothes, it could just be getting rid of your old phone and going to a new one, like all these things that we just continue to cycle through when it's not really necessary. With that rate per person, we are one of the highest averages in the world, per person. So I think it's really important to try to lower that as much as possible, be a lot more sustainable, and just stop cycling through stuff, because that's a lot of money that we're throwing away as well. Recently, the home storage industry has been going up by about 10% per year, and since the early 2000s, it has doubled. This kind of goes to show that we have too much stuff and people are trying to find a way to deal with that. And a lot of people, instead of embracing minimalism and trying to just narrow down their possessions to what's truly important to them, decide to go a different way and spend money to try to fix the problem and try to organize their stuff. But a lot of times you can't just organize your stuff in order to keep your house clean and simple. You have to stop consuming and also start getting rid of some of the excess stuff that you do have. And Americans throw away about like 30% of their food. So I like to look at that as, let's say you spend $300 a month on food and you throw 30% of that away, whether that's, the stuff that's in the Tupperware in the back of the fridge or whatever, then you're throwing away $100 a month. So every time you're throwing something away, try to think of the dollar value of that. Maybe this is $20 that I'm throwing away, or $5 or $1, because you'll see that like you're literally just taking a 20 and throwing it in the trash. The average American donates around 1.9% of their income to charity, and I believe that's because a lot of people are living paycheck to paycheck. So even though we are one of the richest countries in the world, a lot of people are living paycheck to paycheck, and a lot of the reason for that is because of consumerism. It's because of the amount of stuff that we are buying and throwing away instead of giving to those in need. That's one of the reasons I'm such a big fan of frugal living, is because if you are limiting your expenses as much as you can and you are saving money and building wealth, then you get to that position where you're able to make a big impact in the world, as opposed to if you're continually stuck in this cycle, then you're not able to help yourself, you're going to be more stressed, and you're not really able to help those around you. 61% of Americans don't have enough money in their savings to cover a $1,000 emergency. And 40% of Americans don't have enough to cover a $400 emergency. That's a huge portion of the population that, again, is living paycheck to paycheck. And one little emergency, like having car issues or being out of work for a while, any little thing can put them into a spiral of things just getting worse and worse, and having to get into high interest consumer debt and credit card debt just from that one little thing going wrong. The average home has more TVs than it does people living in it. And those TVs are turned on 1/3 of the time, over 8 hours a day. That's an insane amount of time consuming content, consuming ads, which can lead to more cycles of unhappiness, more cycles, of spending money. So just getting rid of half the TVs in your home can make you actually spend a lot less time watching those TVs, and also, you know, spend more time doing things that are valuable, whether it's earning money or hanging out with people. I'm not saying to get rid of TVs entirely. I do think there is a place for them when you're able to hang out and de-stress, whatever. But when it becomes 1/3 of your life is, you know, looking at a TV or at least having it on, that's a lot of time you just don't have to yourself, you know, to think. 38% of US households hold some form of credit card debt. A lot of times they're spending 20 to 30% on the interest for this, and a lot of times that is simply for consumer items where if you made a few changes, you wouldn't be in that situation. 33% of Americans do not have any money saved for their retirement. Now, personally, I talk about early retirement all the time in your 20s and 30s by doing house hacking and things like that. But even if you don't want to go that route and you simply want to invest and put money into, you know, a Roth IRA or a 401k, just do something in your 20s and 30s. And it'll make things so much easier for you if you let that compound over the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. Because when you get older, you do not want to have to get a part-time job making minimum wage at something that you don't want to do when you could have just made a few choices earlier in your life to bypass that entirely. 40% of student loan borrowers are expected to go into default by 2023. There's a lot of things on either side, whether we should be getting help with our student loans, whether it's something that everybody should have for free, or whether you should be paying for it. I personally think it is a complete waste of time. And if you spend those 4 years earning money, then you won't even need a job by the time everybody else is just beginning their careers. That's why I personally didn't go to college. I think if your goal is to reach financial independence in early retirement, then it's definitely not a great choice. But if your goal is to, you know, become a nurse or a doctor or something like that, then it's definitely something that is needed. But for most of the things out there, if you want to be successful, go out and put in the work and gain some experience rather than go that route. If you guys are enjoying this and getting some value, feel free to like and subscribe so you can see more content. I post like this every single Monday. Women spend on average 8 years of their lives shopping. It's a lot of shopping. I know for some people it's a recreational activity, but I think there's things that could help more people than continually going to the stores and shopping. And that's definitely guys too. I know I used to struggle with this a while ago. And once you get in that cycle, that can be your little high of when you find something. You know, it's that little high of getting it and finding a deal and all this sort of stuff. But there's so many better ways to use our time than to get sucked into the trap of consumerism and getting more stuff. Enough said. The average size of the American home has tripled over the past 50 years. But 1 out of 10 people are renting storage units. So not only are we spending a lot more on housing than we need to and having a lot more house because we have those 300,000 things that need to go in that house, but a lot of people are going into self-storage, and that's actually one of the fastest growing industries right now. And it's actually the fastest growing industry in commercial real estate right now. You'd be better off throwing all that stuff away, getting no money for it, and usually if you're storing it, you can at least get some money for it trying to sell it. And then taking that money that you're saving, that $100 a month or whatever you're spending on that storage unit, and buying all new stuff in a couple years when you'd be ready to pull that out. 25% of people with 2-car garages don't have room to park a car inside them. This has been most houses of people that I know, they can't actually park their car inside of their garage because it's a storage, it's a catch-all. That's where everything goes. You know, it's just covered with stuff. 3.1% of the world's kids live in America, but they own 40% of the toys consumed globally. The average 10-year-old owns over 200 toys, but usually plays with about 12 on the average day. Just off the bat, I am not a parent yet, but I do see this cycle of people didn't have things when they were younger. Maybe you grew up rough or you always wanted something, and then you end up overcompensating and giving your kids too much stuff, and that starts to form in them habits where if they see something, they end up getting it, they get that little high of playing with it, and then they put it in the closet and they move on to the next thing. And that habit that is formed in childhood can really set you back later in life when you start doing that same thing, but the things get more expensive. Maybe it's clothes, maybe it's electronics or cars or whatever. You see that, you end up not having that delayed gratification because you didn't have to practice it as a child, and it ends up getting you into a lot of debt and a lot of issues in the future. That's my 2 cents on it anyways. Hope you guys enjoy this. What stat stuck out to you the most? Let me know. I want to let you guys know that we did start up our podcast again, Finances Unfiltered, where we talk about this type of stuff, and we also talk about financial content and, you know, simple intentional living for normal everyday people, how you can retire early, that type of stuff. I'll leave a link
down below if you want to check it out, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.